Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Let's see how my slides are working. It looks like they are. Yeah, I think that's working. Oh, how's the conference been for you all? It's good so far. I've really been enjoying it. I love coming to this conference. So my name is Zuill. I've been doing software development since the early 80s. And what I'm going to share with you is what I consider to be advanced software teaming. Software teaming and mob programming are essentially the same thing. When I first shared the ideas of mob programming, I'd adopted the name from a paper I'd read that was written a few years before we started doing it. And I just thought, well, I'm not the one to make up a name for this. There already was a name. So I just went ahead and started using it. And over time, some people thought mob was a little too negative of a connotation. And some people would say, I'm not a programmer, so I shouldn't do mob programming. So I switched my thinking about it and decided that, well, I want to start calling it software teaming. But I'm not requiring anyone else change how they say it. So I just want to make that clear. Almost always when I share this, people want to know how to do things, and I'm just sharing some of the things we did, because they might be interesting to you. So I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to share with you some of the things we did, and you might find them interesting to you, or that they might spark a thought for you, something you might want to do. I'm going to do a really quick introduction to mob programming, software teaming, and then we'll go into what I mean by advanced. So mob programming, software teaming is all the brilliant minds working together on the same thing at the same time and in the same space, which is to me what Agile software development is about. When I first heard about Agile, this was a lot of things I thought that we can't be collaborating if we're not working on the same thing. It enhances our ability to collaborate if we can do it at the same time. And it really improves our ability to collaborate if we're doing it in the same space. Now, that space can be virtual. Nowadays, we do a lot of work remotely, and you can collaborate remotely. Mob programming just really emphasizes this by we're all sitting at the same computer screens. We're looking at the same things together. The big idea is if we gather together all the skills and knowledge that we need, then we can work on anything from start to finish directly without the wastes of queuing and excess inventory. And really, it eliminates a lot of the problems of doing software development. So I'm not saying it's the best way to collaborate, it's just a way to collaborate. And it will look like this. That's some of our original team. Back, we hadn't even been working this way. We hadn't even been working this way for a year, but we had pretty much settled into working this way every single day. We mostly worked as a team. And of course, even back in those days, it could be done remotely. We see a lot more than that, of that nowadays. So this is about what I call advanced software teaming. The overarching concept with this is that I'm trying to share the ideas that were important to me at the time we started doing mob programming, where we originally started doing this work. Now, other people had been doing similar things, but it turned into our main way of working. So these are the ideas I'm going to share with you that I consider maybe more about the environment that we have and the kind of thinking that was in place when we started working this way. I'm going to share this story about my first job. I was 12 or 13 years old, and I got a job to water plants in a nursery where they grew plants for sale to people, to landscape their home. And my boss, Mr. Smith, Lawrence Smith was his name, took me aside the very first day, and he said, you have two jobs. You have two responsibilities. The first one is, well, you're here to water the plants, but that's not a very simple thing to do. Watering the plants, you want to do this not only to keep the plants alive, but to give them a chance to thrive. Give them a chance to have the best plant life they can have. He even said, the plant can't get up and walk over to the drinking fountain like you can. We need to bring the water to the plant, because the plants were growing in little pots. So that's my main job. And he actually told me, you've got to learn the different watering needs of each species of plant that we grow, because They're all different. Some need more water, some need less water. You could harm one plant by giving it too much water, harm another one by giving it too little. You need to know the right amounts. So he was telling me, you've got a lot of learning to do. He actually gave me a book on the care of these kinds of plants. And then he said you have another responsibility, and that is you need to pay attention. And whenever you find a way that we can make an improvement in the way we do things, then we're going to take action on that. So this is a very simple concept that I think Mr. Smith understood really well. The concept here, the concept is if we pay attention to what's going on and we try to make a lot of improvements, they can be very tiny improvements. And this will lead to a lot of what I would say results. I found a book many years later that showed this graph. This book's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he says if you can get a 1% improvement per day, you get a 37.78 times improvement over a year. That's not 37.78% improvement, it's 3,778%, I think. I'm not a real mathematician, right? So I thought, well, I better check this out. So I put it into an Excel spreadsheet, you know how we do. And yep, it actually worked out. Now, I don't know that we can get a 1% improvement every day. I don't know. It's a theory, right? But I think Mr. Smith understood this. And I'm just going to say, let's have that tiny improvement happen. That tiny improvements habit is a very powerful thing. We might not always get 1% per day, but it has this compounding effect over time. But unfortunately, it's not as simple as that because it's really hard to get those tiny improvements. And I learned this with at the plant nursery. There were a lot of things to improve, and we made a lot of improvements over the years. Unfortunately, that's how I thought work was supposed to be. Remember, this is my first job, and I'm only 12 or 13 years old. I thought that at our work, we're supposed to be looking for ways to make improvements. It turns out this was one of the only places I've ever worked where they were focused on using all the brain power, including the little kids. In those days in the U.S., it wasn't uncommon where I lived for a kid my age to get at least a summer job. And everybody was looking for ways to make things better. But this is a big part of why I think it makes things hard to manage. Now, you normally do this next thing as an exercise. We don't really have time to do an exercise. So what I'd like to do is just have somebody here, if you feel up to it, call out answering this question. What makes things difficult? Think over the last year or the last few months, what has made it hard to get your work done? What has made it hard for you to be effective in getting your work done? Anybody have a thought? Please. Context switching. Give me a few more. Communication problems. Focusing on the wrong metrics. Oh boy. Yeah, metrics are a problem in themselves. They're usually proxies, right? What else? We've always done it like this. Yeah, the dogma really gets in our way. You had something over here.
Fear of failure.
Fear of failure. Yeah, you can't fail if you don't try. Yeah. Maybe one more. Yes, please. And unclear responsibilities. Watch this. I've done this in sessions going back over 20 years. I asked this question in some company I'm working with. This was a 3-minute exercise of 20 people at a company in Boston. They hadn't learned how to do mob programming yet, because I often use this in my mob programming workshops, and I was there to teach them mob programming, which I'm now calling software teaming. I typed out their list. They had 50 items. Someone here shouted out, everything you shouted out is probably on this list. Look at that one. We said context switching, unclear requirements, unclear expectations, dependencies on other teams, external dependencies, technical blockers, waiting on a dependency, multitasking, distractions, workflow interruptions. I love the first two, that's why I put them at the top, fatigue and hunger. And then these two down here are my favorite, maybe, too much noise, too quiet. Two very different people. These are interesting things. So let's explore this for a second. What have I learned over time is there are a lot of these, I'm putting them in quotes, problems. They stay with us forever, and they are everywhere I go. Doesn't matter what country, what company. I've seen these over and over. So let's consider, why are they so profuse? Why are they so persistent? Why are they so pervasive? Why? Well, I'm going to go back to my second job in software development. I got on a team of 200 developers who were all just fired to work on a project that they claimed would take 3 months. How long does a 3-month project take, by the way? Somebody tell me.
About 18.
18 months. Yeah, well, that would be very generous in this case. It took them 3 years to finally cancel the project. They said it would take 3 months. It wasted the money of the company that was doing this work for their internal needs, and I think it caused them to lose their competitive edge in their particular industry. They were a large, well-known company that was making a lot of money. 1999, you can understand the economy in 1999 was booming everywhere. So the beautiful thing at working in this place is they were doing what we would now call retrospectives every 6 weeks. So in a 3-month project, we really would have only had one of those retrospectives. I stayed there long enough to have 4 of them. And we did them every 6 weeks. And that's part of what attracted me to them, is that they were going to do some things that we would now call agile. In those days, there wasn't such a thing called agile. It's mostly extreme programming, I guess, or Scrum or other things like that. So they're going to have the reflections. So we charge off, we do our work. At the end of the time period, we looked at what are the big problems we had. And in this case, their estimates were off, yeah. The requirements weren't clear when they started, and the requirements kept changing. And what are we going to do about it? We need to get better at estimating, we need to get better at understanding the requirements, and we need to control the changes. Are any of those going to work? Well, we went off to do our work. They were helping us learn how to do these things, and we charged back in doing our work. So after the next six-week period of doing work, we went for our retrospective again. What do you think the problems we saw were? The same. Same problems, same idea how to try to go about fixing it, and off we charge for our next 6 weeks. Okay, our third retrospective, what were the problems? Same problems. Same, let's try to fix them. There's a problem here, and I gave this a term. I called this the cycle of continuous no improvement. I've seen it over and over almost everywhere I've worked since then, since 1999. We attempt to solve problems, and we end up not getting the results we want. So I don't think we're actually addressing problems. Is it problems or is it symptoms? And I suspect all of these are symptoms. These are symptoms, and we cannot, if they are symptoms, which I think they are, we can't solve symptoms. You can address symptoms by trying to hide them. So for example, if you caught a cold and you're sneezing, you have a congestion, you have a sore throat, you have a coughing, you have a headache, you can take a cough suppressant, you can take a sore throat suppressant, I don't know what you call that. You could take a decongestant, you could take something to get rid of your headache, but you still have the cold. The problem didn't go away, and now you feel good enough to go out and party that night and give the same disease to everybody. So this is the thing, we can't solve for symptoms. So at best, when we solve for the symptom, we are hiding the problem. We feel good now, let's go out. You get the idea, I hope. So let's consider, though, I think, a much bigger conundrum. Now, I will answer this in a little bit, but can we solve problems? What I've often seen over and over again when we are trying to solve a problem is today's solution just becomes tomorrow's problem. If this has ever occurred for you, consider back. Were we really trying to solve the problem, or were we addressing the symptoms? But I think in a lot of cases, we have the situation where we cannot solve the problem that we see or think we found. There's lots of reasons for it, and I'm going to try and cover that as we go. I call this the problem with problems, and there's actually several of them, but I think things are hard to manage because we focus on solving problems. And we'll kind of tell you what I think we can do about that in a little bit. One of these issues has to do with what I call the misplaced focus of management. Management is often focused on solving problems in the organization. One of the big problems they're facing is it's hard to manage things. So what are we going to do about it? Let's try to make it easy to manage things. I think this is the wrong approach. because of this saying that supposedly comes from Peter Drucker, but I have found no original source for this from Peter Drucker. But whoever said it, I applaud them, okay? So much of what we call management consists in making it difficult for people to work. I hope you can see that if we are trying to solve the problem of it being too hard to manage things, we want to make it easier to manage. We will make it even harder to get the work done, which means management will become harder to do, which means we're going to try even more to make the work easier to do. It's a self-defeating cycle. So why do we let this happen? Ken, I got to go right back to the beginning, though, say, these are the things I was thinking about when I got to the place where I was hired to help a team that really needed some help. And we landed on the idea of mob programming after we started learning how to collaborate. So why do we let this happen? And I want to quickly cover the idea of beliefs and biases. They go hand in hand. So beliefs are, this is a necessity. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about it. I like this thing from Dave Gray. I read this in a blog post, and he ended up putting it in a book. So I've used this for a long time. He talks about reality as being like everything there is, and we can't be exposed to that. But we're going to be exposed to some of it. Those are the things we experience. But we can only pay attention to a very small amount of it. And that's something I've been reading and learning about for the last 2 or 3 years quite a bit. But way back in the 2000, the first decade, these are the things I was watching. And when I saw Dave write about this, I really liked what he captured here. We can only pay attention to a very small bit of it. And that's what we can base our theories, our judgments, and eventually our beliefs on. Now, there are other ways we get our beliefs. This is just one way. And that becomes what we would call obvious. This thing's obvious. My experience, my beliefs show me this is obvious. Unfortunately, these really important things are based on this tiny little thread of attention we can spend, that we use. Here's the thing. Things are hard to manage because what we believe is based on that thin thread. However, beliefs are necessary. If we didn't have the beliefs, we would wear ourselves out thinking everything through. Everything we need to do would require a lot of heavy-duty energy to do the thinking to do it. So the beliefs are necessary, but they also limit us. We have to understand what we believe. I had a saying I used to use, I still do frequently. I would say the thing that I believe the most in is probably where my biggest problem is. I have to be really careful to pay attention to what I believe in. Coupled with this is the biases. Now, I found this drawing on Wikipedia or something. There's only one true source of information in the world, and it, of course, is Wikipedia. And when I found this, I said, boy, this is beautiful. They got, I don't know, more than 100 biases, subcategorized and categorized. I mean, wow. Somebody really did their work here. 20 years ago, I couldn't find stuff like this, but we got to pay attention to this. I'm only going to share one. If you've been to any conferences in the last 10 years, you've heard people talking about this one. Confirmation bias. We're biased towards confirming our existing belief. So once we believe something, we're going to want to confirm it over and over again. That results in a biased search for the information that could inform us, and we don't want to allow it to inform us. We're going to filter that in a biased way, so whatever we find, we're only going to allow into us the things that confirm our belief. We're going to interpret it in a way that's biased. I've actually seen studies that show the same article given to people of opposing views, they can use that article of information to prove their point of view. That's confirmation bias, interpretation, okay? And we will change our memories to fit the belief we want to have. So things are hard to manage because it's human nature for us to want to confirm what we already believe in. And maybe perhaps worse, it's human nature for us to confirm the thing we want to believe in. We don't necessarily believe it yet, but we so much want it to be true that we will have a bias, confirmation bias, so to speak, to get that. I think this is called desirability bias. I think I found somebody explain that recently. I've been looking for a name for that. So I'm going to give you an example of a belief that limits us. We believe we succeeded because we're talented. We know what we're doing. We made the right decisions. We did things the right way. So Kahneman, I can I've read 2 of his books, maybe some articles and other things, and I really like what he says about this. But I don't think there's anything that he's written that I didn't find useful to me. So he says success is talent plus luck. We have to have some kind of talent, or I would say capability, and some luck, and we can succeed. But he says great success is a little more talent and a lot more luck. It's about the luck. It's about the random good things that happen for us. So things can be hard to manage because the success is about this randomness. And when we succeed, we believe it's because we did the right thing. We did it well. We knew what we were doing. We think we just need to keep doing what we've been doing, and we're going to continue to succeed. We're going to just repeat the great things we learned that got us to where we are, and we're probably wrong about this. So here's a great little, when I found this saying, I thought, this is exactly what I'm talking about. At some time in the life cycle of virtually every organization, its ability to succeed in spite of itself runs out. We had the success not because we were brilliant. It's because we were getting that luck, that serendipity. And eventually, because we think everything we're doing was the right thing, and now it's no longer the right thing, we don't give up that belief. We want to believe we were brilliant. Okay, so I want to get into another bit. So that's the biases, that's the beliefs and biases. I want to talk about failure to communicate. Surprisingly, this next little bit that I'm going to share with you is not well known, and I don't know why yet. Does anybody know Zuill's laws? Anybody here know of Zuill's laws? So it's your job after today to spread this everywhere you go. So what if Zuill's laws are true? Here's his fundamental law. Communication usually fails except by accident. So when I'm doing workshops and consulting in a company, I'm going to ask them, what if this is true? I don't necessarily believe it to be true, and I think he means it to be tongue-in-cheek or slightly humorous or really humorous. But what if this is true? What will we do about it? I'm going to give you some of his other laws. If communication can fail, it will. If communication cannot fail, it still most usually fails. It's by luck or accident that it succeeded. I love these next 2. If communication seems to succeed in the intended way, there's a misunderstanding. We both walk away going, good, we communicated, but we didn't. I love this one as a companion to the other one. If you are content with your message, communication certainly has failed. At the end of this talk, somebody who wasn't here will come to me and say, how did your talk go? And I will always say, I don't really know, because I don't want to say it was great. I was happy with my talk, because that means I failed. That's what he's telling me, okay? So if a message can be interpreted in several ways, watch this, it will be interpreted in the manner that maximizes the damage. My goodness, we're doomed. This last one, so these 2 combined together is maybe social media. There's always someone who knows better than you what you meant with your message. Yeah, have you ever experienced that? Yeah. That's social media or Twitter or, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said Twitter, but yeah, what a world. So this thin thread of attention we can pay that leads to all these issues is about my truth. And that means there's going to be my truth and your truth. And this is part of why we're not able to communicate. We'll come back to this later. I was trying to learn from the years 1999 till 2009, how can we make improvements in these organizations I'm working in when it was almost impossible? And this next bit's going to address that. Systems and domains. There's going to be a lot of systems people here, right? That's what we're here for. I'm not a systems thinker, but I try to study what the systems thinkers developed. So a quick definition for me of system, I put this together out of the other definitions. A system is an interconnected and interacting set of elements that achieve something. There's some result from it. And I like this little saying from Arthur Jones, I think it's from him. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. That's when you're in an organization and things aren't going the way they want it to go, they've got to realize that it's their system is giving them that results that's happening because the system they have is perfectly designed to do whatever is happening. We'll address why we can't change it in a minute. But there are systems, I'm giving you some scattered things I want to bring together. There are systems within systems. So Donella Meadows, who did a very nice book called Thinking in Systems, systems can be nested within systems. Therefore, there must be purposes within purposes. And these things are problematic. What I want to share about this is what I would call the level of systems. You can think of the work itself as being within a system, like let's make a sandwich. Outside of that is going to be the system of work. Maybe it's defined, maybe not, but the steps we follow to make the sandwich. The making of the sandwich is the actual work. The steps to doing it is not the actual work itself, it's how we define how that work gets done. Outside of that might be a system of management. Outside of that might be a system of purpose. These are arbitrary. I just put them here to define this circle within a circle within a circle. Here's one of the things that I need to share about this. There are levels of these systems. Within this interior space, we might see a problem manifesting itself in the form of symptoms. Remember we talked about symptoms earlier. You cannot address the symptoms within the system you observe them. You can't change a system within the system. You don't have the ability to do that within there. At least this is according to what I understand about system thinking. So you need to address it at an outer point. But how far out do we need to go? At any one of these stages, we still might be just seeing symptoms. Oh man, we're doomed, are we not? I don't mean to depress you too much, but I gave this talk in Iceland once in November. They're already preparing to be really depressed for the rest of the, deep into the winter. And I could tell I was just really making them feel miserable. So please don't get too depressed. It's springtime. Everything's good. So things are hard to manage because we rarely consider at what level the problem is located and at what level we need to address it. Also, we often don't realize these things aren't isolated. This is nice and neat. But around us is all other kind of systems. There is the ecosystem. There is the government of the country we're in, the government of the city we're in, the health of the community. There's all kinds of stuff going on that is not anything close to being within what we think we can control. And they're overlapping. Now, you probably noticed on what's causing us to be ineffective in our work from Boston, one of their things was snow days. You may or may not get snow days here, but there they can get 2 to 3 feet of snow overnight and nobody can get to work. That destroyed their effectiveness. So that's sort of, there are things outside of our control. So I want to cover a little bit more about systems. And when I found the book this next thing comes from, it was very enlightening to me. Now, I think this book is meant to be very humorous, but it's just so cutting that it would be really funny if it didn't seem to be so true to me. But John Gall's book, The Systems Bible, or Systematics, when I first read it, you couldn't even buy it. It was out of print. You had to find it at a used bookstore. Look at this. A working complex system has invariably evolved from a working simple system. Underlying that is the idea that we cannot design a system. Now we're talking about a system not like a computer system. We're talking about a system like an organization's way of working or an ecosystem or something like that. If that's true, we cannot affect the system. This next one tells us really why. An important function of the system is to ensure its own perpetuation. Well, that makes things extra difficult, doesn't it? Because whatever the system's doing, whatever we apply to try and change it, it will change, but never in a way we think it should. And that's what this next thing tells us. The idea of making a system, a complex system, remember we're talking about complex systems, do exactly what we wanted to do, can be achieved only temporarily. There is no way to predict what our attempted change is going to do. And when we see it changing the way we want it to, we think we did the things the right way. The unintended consequences are not yet apparent. And it will come back to bite us later. So we're going to go back to Arthur Jones. Same thing. The system does what it does. That's perfectly designed to do it. You need to pay attention to that. We have to know the space we're in. So things are hard to manage because the system is good at perpetuating itself. And it does this by evolving. not by intervention, not by transformation, not by adoptions, which is what everybody's trying to do everywhere I go, and it won't change the way we want it to. So you can see you're getting more depressed now than we were before, right? It just won't change the way we want it to. So now I'm going to talk about Cynefin, because Cynefin is something at every DDD or Agile or Lean conference, somebody's got to talk about Cynefin. So I'm going to talk about Cynefin because it touches on domains. There are other models very similar to this. You've seen the Stacy model and others. But I'm going to give my very quick thinking about this. There's a huge issue with the domains, and we need to understand the domains we're in. We need to at least have an understanding there are different domains. So where I come from in the US, you can buy a can of dough, and if you just follow the instructions on the can of dough, you open it up, separate the biscuits, you put them on a cookie sheet, you put it in the oven, make sure you've preheated the oven to 350 or whatever it says to do, and you just cook them. You just follow the instructions, you don't need to think about it. To me, that's the clear space. In the complicated space, what if you want really wonderful croissants? You cannot do that by opening up a can of croissant dough and putting on a cookie sheet. It takes an expert to do this. So this is the space of expertise. We need to have the knowledge to do this. We have to pay a lot of attention to get the perfection we want. But all the unknowns are known. In the clear space, there are no unknowns. We just follow the instructions. We can't just follow the instructions here. And I could give a very clear example from my own work. I used to own a shop where we did graphics and signage and advertising stuff. And one of the things we had is a screen print shop that would print posters and signage. And we identified 37, I think it was 37, variables that would cause a problem with the screen printing process. So if the print was starting to become unclear or a little bit smeary or something like that, we could look that up. And we could just go to our list of the problems that could happen, and it's going to be in a grouping of those 37. We find the grouping where it looks like, well, this is the problem. Here's the things that can cause it. And we find it. We go, oh, that's it there. This is the expertise and knowledge part. Then we could go fix the thing, and off we go. Everything's better. The complex space is like this. So I'm trying to use food, molecular gastronomy. This is a process of discovery. We can't follow a recipe. And our expertise has to be in something very different. The expertise is going to be about experimentation and discovery. And there are a lot of unknowns, and we don't know what the unknowns are yet. When we start, so we don't have a recipe to follow, we're trying to invent new food experiences. This is the complex space. There's no checklist to follow. There might be some for the easier parts of this, but then we have the chaotic space. This is my model of cooking. When I'm cooking, I will put something in the oven. I'll go in the other room. Maybe I'm going to check my emails or something. And then I go, hey, it smells smoky in here. What's that? Well, yeah, my food caught on fire. So what do you do when something like this happens? I think of this as chaotic. And any of you real Cynefin people here, I'm not sure I get the chaos thing right. This is just the way I'm thinking about it. It helps me. You just follow your fluency. If you've thought about the fires before, I've burnt food in the oven before. So when I put something in the oven, I wet a dishcloth and put it next to the oven. Because I know if I catch it on fire, I can open the oven and throw the towel in there, and it puts the fire out. Then the food looks at best like this, and I can turn to the family and say, now, let me say it this way. When that's on fire, we don't go, how can we make it where it doesn't burn next time? That's not our time for reflection. It's after we put the fire out, we take the food out, now we can reflect. And I would ask the family, do you want to eat this? Or are we going out to dinner today? They always were glad to see I was cooking because they knew we're going to go out to dinner later because I'm going to ruin the food. So the tactics and techniques we use are going to be different from domain to domain. This is really difficult for several reasons. We often don't understand the domain of the problem. And I usually see it as we who are working in the complex space wish we were in the complicated space. Those who are in the complicated space act as if they're in the simple space or clear space. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't even know that these things exist. But we can't use the same techniques in each of these areas. It's a different approach. Okay, so we covered a lot of stuff. Let's have the tiny improvements habit. We should have just been able to stop there. Let's have that tiny improvements habit. If you just get good at that, all the rest of the good will come to you. But there's a lot of things that get in the way. We learned that. We had the thing of problems versus symptoms, the wrong focus of management, which is really takes us down a path of cycling through a path of a continuous vicious cycle of destruction. We had our beliefs and biases. We talked about luck or talent, the failure to communicate, and the systems and domains. So now I want to get to some practical stuff. This was my space. What am I addressing? I was trying to become really familiar with what I was addressing. So by 2009, I had one thing I had invented for myself. I'm no longer going to work at a place that isn't prepared to make the changes they need to make, whatever they might be. I'm no longer going to try to convince people. I'm no longer in the convincing business. I'm just going to work with people who are ready to make the changes I hope we discover that we need to make. We don't know what they are yet. We have to be open-minded and willing to do this. So I want to cover this practical stuff. The first thing, well, I'm going to give you the 5 or 6 things, and I'll cover them pretty quickly. The thing I call turn up the good, working smarter, which originated, my first reference I found to was in 1938, so it's been around a long time. This concept of make it easy, which is really, really important to me. That's about Mr. Smith's idea of continuous improvement. The bubble, which gave me a way to think about how can I influence inside of an organization without it getting crushed by the system. Collaborating rather than communicating. We'll discover why I think that's important. And the idea of leading from within. So that's what we have in our remaining time, and I think I can do this. If I don't get it, the rest of your lives will be filled with a void. I mean, we'll have a void you will be unable to fill. I'm sorry. So let's cover turn up the good first. I don't know exactly when I first heard about this, but I think that's what Mr. Smith was doing. We're always looking for a way to make things, whatever's working, a little bit better. But this puts a real focus on it. And I love the way Kent Beck talked about this. Hopefully everybody has read something from Kent Beck. And the white version of the, because he has the white and the green versions, the first and second edition of the Extreme Programming Explained book. In the first version, at least, there's kind of an intro that says this. When I first articulated extreme programming, I had the mental image of knobs on a control board. Now, I'm showing that control board because when I was 20 or so, maybe 22 or 3, I had that exact control board. I found it online. It's a way of controlling the amplifiers, the microphones, the instruments, whatever, to create a performance in a building like this. So that's what I'm thinking he was talking about. We got all these knobs, and each knob he thought of as being a practice that from experience, that's important, he already knew worked well. And he thought, I could turn these knobs up to 10 and see what happened. That's an exact quote from him. Exact quote. Here's what he's saying. I had experience with these things. Experience is a practical contact with an observation of facts or events. Practical contact with an observation of facts and events. He's had experience with this. And now he's reflecting on it. What's the value here? Is there anything meaningful? And the experiment is, can we turn it up? So this is the scientific procedure undertaken to make a discovery, test a hypothesis, or demonstrate a known fact. And I think this is super important. I think this little thing from Kent Beck, I adopted that to make it easy for me to explain turn up the good. So remember this. What are the things that destroy effectiveness? We noticed that many of these problems simply faded away when we turned up the good on collaboration. We didn't set out to solve a single one of these problems. The problems literally, watch this amazing animation, they literally faded away. Did you see the fading? I'll show you that again. They faded away when we started working as a group. It took me a long time to figure out how to do that 10 years ago when I first started talking about this, so I have to keep pointing out how brilliant I am. Turning up the good on collaboration led to the disappearance of many of those symptoms. They weren't problems, they were symptoms. This is the power of turning up the good. There's a caveat to that. We get good things without knowing they even exist, but the caveat is we don't really know what good we're going to get. We know that if we turn up the good, something good will happen, but we don't know where this will lead. So we often block that because we determine what we want first, and then we try to go in the direction we want to go. And that will stop us from seeing the good. And this is really about the tiny improvements habit. So I want to talk about the working smarter part. In 2001, I'm so glad I stumbled upon this paper. It's called Nobody Ever Gets Credit for Fixing Problems That Never Happened. What a great title for research. And you can get this online for free. It's about, 25 pages at the most, including references. It's not that much. But the end result of it is he goes through some causal loop diagrams, and he shows us this, or the two professors show us this. I've kind of reversed their chart, but it's effort times capability that gives us our performance. So when we're working harder, we're always saying, we got to work harder to get this done. It gives us less and less time for improving performance or improving capability. Working smarter means we have less time for getting the work done, but we're improving our capability. So it's effort that we can put in times our capability. So over time, our capability drops, the more we don't work on improving our capability, and over time, the more our capability increases. So the combination of these two things will mean over time our actual performance will drop or increase, which depends on whether we're working smarter or working harder. So I believe that Sturman and Repenning in their paper are saying we need to spend more time increasing capability than in doing the work. Now it's clear to some degree perhaps you kind of agree with this because you're at a conference where you can increase your capability. You increase your knowledge and your abilities as you go forward. So this again is about the tiny improvements habit. We were learning to do this during that first decade of the 2000s in different ways. When I finally landed on the ideas of daily study together, that just really, I can now start seeing maybe that 1% per day is happening, and I really loved it. So this is, again, the tiny improvements habit. Let's look at the make it easy. So remember the misplaced focus of management. Let's make it easy to manage things. That is broken. If this is true from whoever actually said this, most of what we consider to be management consists in making it hard for people to get their work done. I've actually seen it in organizations where if things aren't working well, they put more control on the system. And that more control just makes it harder to get our work done. So I just would flip this over and say, rather than ever focusing on making things easy to manage, let's focus on making things easy to do the work. And really, I put it this way. Make it possible for everyone to be the best they can be. And maybe we'll never do any better than that. This means things will get easier and easier to manage over time. And if you really do this right, there will no longer be any need for management, and we can fire all of them. I hope there's not too many managers here. That was mostly meant to be slightly humorous. But I've been a manager most of my life. I've done lots of management things, and I've done a lot of things wrong. I think this is nearing truth. Let's focus management on making it easier for people to be the best they can be, and it will become easier to manage them. What are we trying to do? We're trying to optimize for the flow of the work. If we can optimize for the flow of the work rather than the output of the individual, we're paying attention to the right thing. In working this way, we're not trying to get the most work out of each person, which is about utilization, which I think is very problematic. We're trying to get the best from each person. I love this picture. Every picture in my talk, most of the pictures came from my wife, who's a children's book author and illustrator. And when I saw her do this picture, I thought I'd really like to put this in here. The title of it was something like, Anna was afraid they would discover she was an imposter. And I think that's a really cute idea. She wants to be a kindergartner, and she's afraid they won't think she's a kindergartner. It has nothing to do with what I wrote there. I just like the drawing. So I read a book recently called Friction, and its byline was this: make the right things easier and the wrong things harder. I thought that kind of encapsulates this. And again, we do this by having tiny improvements habit. So let's look at the bubble. We have just enough time, I think, to get through the rest of this stuff. The bubble was the idea I was using when I arrived at the place. They hired me to work with this team, and I knew that whatever we would do would be crushed by the system. So this is how we work with systems, or I was picturing working within systems and the concept of domains. So if the system's going to resist change, what are we going to do about it? Is it hopeless? Then so that was 2011, and in 2013 I saw this guy document what I was thinking. And he wasn't, let me say that again. Michael Sahota wrote this, I don't know where he got it from. He might have heard me talk, but I don't know. But when I saw him use this, I thought, oh, I want to use that. So this is sort of what I was picturing. Here's an organization. I think I'll try and use this clicker, see if it works. Yep. So here's the bubble within the organization. Is going to be down here where I'm going to work. So this space would represent me right here. The overarching organization may not be compatible with what I want to do, but I need to have some kind of a bubble within which I could exist. So my boss who was directly above me was the one who could provide my bubble, and then I was going to provide a bubble for these people down below me. The way this works is, this area is where we could think about in making the kinds of improvements that we don't yet know we need. We could just keep turning up the good on everything. My hope was it eventually would grow to include that direct boss who hired me to try to make improvements within this company. I want to point one thing out. You need adapters so the whole rest of the organization can operate with your work the same way they would have worked before you start trying to make the changes, or else they'll crush it. And we also need the adapters with the rest of this department so that they can work with us as they expect. And that way we would get a chance. But my hope was we could push this out. And as other people kind of experience the way we were working, they'll start thinking the same as us. And maybe we would not just push it out, but we could get that crossed across that whole department. I never fully got that there. I was only there for 4 years. But also at the same time, I was reaching out to the rest of the organization, looking for other people who might be compatible. And as I found them, I would communicate with them, and slowly we built this. You can think of it like maybe we're skeletonizing the existing organization. Eventually, there's so many people with their own bubbles, maybe not the same, but somehow compatible with each other, that it just spreads everywhere. And pretty soon, the original organization is changed without us actually trying to change it. That's theoretical, right? I don't know if that ever could happen. But that's sort of what I was thinking we could do. Then how do we do that? We introduce the chance for a small system to exist. Because another thing John Gall said was, invariably, a working complex system evolved from a working simple system, but most simple systems don't work. So we have to have lots of chances for simple systems to find a few that would work that could maybe turn into complex systems. So we need to give them a chance to evolve. So I want to kind of get to where we're wrapping things up. We need to protect the inside the bubble from outside the bubble. There was a quote from Ed Catmull who said, you have to protect the new ideas from the people that don't realize there's going to have to be a lot of ungreatness before there's any greatness. That's the same idea. So we'll cover 2 more things. We talked about the collaboration rather than communication. We remember Wheel's laws. Communication usually fails except by accident. And one of the reasons I think it happened was because of this your truth and my truth that happened because of different experiences. Let's push those things together. At some points it turns into my truth plus your truth. And eventually that turns into our truth. Now we have 2 threads of attention on the same experience. And that will grow. And as we add more people, to some extent, that amount of attention grows. We benefit from that each individually, and as a group, we're starting to get a shared understanding, a shared attention grows, and each individual's attention grows because it's being bolstered by everyone else focusing on the same thing at the same time. This is what led us, I think, a big part to mob programming. So when we got to mob programming, we were getting this continuous alignment, continuous feedback, and we were all learning from the same experiences. So right or wrong, we'd at least... I'm going to point out, if we have a tester, a product owner, a coder, a database expert, a coder, and a coder on this particular effort, we didn't need to go to anyone else. So our truth was the only truth that mattered as far as what this team was trying to do. So rather than trying to communicate, I encourage us to figure out how to collaborate. And the communication will come for free. And this can be done through these tiny improvements. So I think we're about, this is my timer telling me we're almost completely done. So I need to ask, does anybody know we have 2 minutes left? Is that right? Okay, so I'm going to rush through it. Leading from within is this idea. Nobody's coming to save us. There's nobody who's going to come and say, we'll fix your organization. So we need to take that responsibility for us. We'll bring the improvements we need. We need to be our own hero. This is really about who do we choose to be. Are we just going to let it ride, or are we going to try to make it better? I want to make it better. I suggest we try to keep this as sustainable and relaxed as possible, which means we don't contribute all of our ideas all the time. We contribute the right thing at the right time in the right way. And this takes a lot of study and practice, and lots of failure along the way. And I kind of like to end with this quote from Robert Henry. The object isn't to create art, it's to be in that wonderful state which makes art inevitable. It's about building these things. You can't push it through. You can't force it to happen. Kevin Meadows and I, Kevin who's here, we wrote a book on software teaming. We encourage you to buy 8 to 10 copies. But thank you very, very much. And I don't know if I got this right, but I think that means thank you so much or something like that. Thank you.